Hi, good evening. Welcome to this Insta Live this evening. And I have a very special guest with us today. It's Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan from the DMK, the Dravida Munnetra Karagam, who's also the IT head. And, I'm excited to have with me today. It's an important conversation, I think, given what is happening in our country. I'm just waiting for him to join us. Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for joining. Good evening. Sorry about the slight delay. Firstly, thank you so much for joining me on this Insta Live interview. It was really kind of you to say yes. And I think, as I was telling our viewers, it's very important to have these conversations at the time, given what's going on in our country and in the state. And of course, you've been very vocal about it. About all the things which are going wrong, as well as praising the things which are going right. Firstly, I want to start off with the coronavirus pandemic, which has affected the world, brought us to a standstill. In India, we've been having so many issues since the lockdown. As far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, do you think that we have done enough, or do you think we still need to go far ahead, because we're seeing nearly 500 cases every day in the state?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for setting this up. Listen, I'm an opposition party member. Part of my job is to tell the government how they should do things better. That's in a democracy the role that we have. And the difference is that we like to be constructive critics, trying to help get the outcome. I'll make the first point here that I've made many times on other TV channels and stuff, which is that if there was ever a time where politics stood second to outcomes, this is that time. I personally, my wife, my children, my mother, my family, my constituents, we are vested in the success of this government. To the extent that they're able to keep the disease spread down and keep the economy on track. If that is the trade-off, that they do a fantastic job and get great political mileage for it, I'm more than happy for them to have that credit. Right? So this is one place where we are all vested in the right outcome, because it's a question of life and death, either medically life and death or economically life and death for millions of people. So I am not interested in criticism for criticism's sake. I will say that whichever government was in power, it was going to be an extremely difficult kind of situation to manage. There's no question. But if I have three basic concerns about the way this government has acted, they are first, that they simply did not understand the extent of the calamity. They were busy doing steady state politics and trying to continue to run the assembly and all that. And as I've said before, either you should be smart enough to have your own good advisors, or you should be smart enough to watch what Kerala is doing and start shutting down and doing things like they do. After all, they're a neighboring state. Or at the very least, you should listen to my leader, and the multiple times we raised it in the assembly, and we said, look, what are you running these sessions for? You're running for demand for grants. In the last 4 years, you have never run a demand for grants before May. Why do you feel the urgency to run these demand for grants in March? And effectively, if the crisis is as bad as we think, all these demands are useless, because your revenues and your projections and everything become void, and you really have to do an amended budget at the kind of end of this crisis, like you do in an election year. And so we are in an exercise of futility, when really all these IAS officers and ministers who should be here, who should be looking at the crisis, are here trying to pass their demands. So if I say, number one, they didn't understand it themselves, didn't listen to the advice of others, and didn't copy the best practices. Number two, we then offered, we said, call an all-party meeting and let us all come together and put in our inputs, and you co-opt us into the struggle, because this is a life and death problem. They said no, and I have a tweet of the Chief Minister on the 31st of March saying this is a medical-only problem. What do I need politicians and advice and other parties for? The doctors will handle it, right? In Karnataka, that hasn't been the case. In Kerala, that hasn't been the case. In Delhi, that hasn't been the case. Even Mr. Modi goes through the motions of calling all-party meetings. In Australia, they have got a national government. They have brought in opposition parties from the state and the central level. So people who understand the depth of the crisis take input from as many people as possible. I would say the second is that they haven't taken it. The third is that with every passing day, it's becoming apparent that they are getting bad or inadequate advice. You know, what Chief Minister goes on TV and says on April 24th, It's come down from 50s a day to 20s a day. In 3 days, it will go to zero. That means you're just not being informed properly. Surely at that point you say, let me expand my circle of advisors, let me expand my inputs, because I'm not getting enough inputs. So broadly, I would say on these three measures, tardiness in starting because of lack of understanding of the extent of the crisis, inability to look past traditional politics and take the inputs of people who actually in other states and the country they're doing, and not getting feedback out of the system that says we are not doing such a great job. What we think is going to happen and what are happening are two different things. Surely at this point I must expand my circle of inputs and my advisors. So these three I would say are the broad criticisms I have, and I hope that they are not seen as partisan but realistic.
Okay, okay. So, now recently in the last few days, we've seen the government, the center, launch, the stimulus package, and every day the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, has been having press conferences talking about the action plan. But the DMK and your party leader, of course, have been very critical of this, because you don't see it as addressing the economy, how it's going to rehabilitate or revive the economy in the coming months.
Yeah, actually, I think we need to take a step back. Before we ever got into this crisis, the economy had been in the worst shape in decades. Whether it was investment, capital formation, whether it was year-over-year growth, whether it was credit growth, whether it was demand. In many ways, it was the worst economy we had seen, at least in my adult lifetime, it was the worst economy we'd seen. So what this, and the situation there was for the first time in the history of India, let me step back a little. In a growing country, very often you should have supply side problems. You don't have enough capital, you're not getting enough investment, not enough factories are being built and you don't have enough jobs. Therefore, your economy is not growing. Here, for the first time since independence, we were in a demand side problem. People were not buying enough biscuits or cars or ACs or clothes. And so factories were cut down to 50% utilization, 30% utilization, 60% utilization. That is an unheard of scale of problem that we have never seen before. So already we were in a demand side problem, rare in a developing country, unprecedented in our situation. This crisis hit. Who did it hit the worst? It hit the poorest and the least secure, the least stable. Right? So those who are migrant workers, who don't have infrastructure, who don't have access to ration cards, who don't have local kind of support systems, were affected the worst. And what I worry about a lot is kind of the government's response seems kind of muddled, right? First of all, they can't make a distinction between fiscal and monetary policy. As you know well, in most other countries, the Reserve Bank or the central bank sticks to the monetary part of it and the government sticks to the fiscal part of it. This separation is good in a democracy. So liquidity, credit access, rates, quantitative easing in extreme cases, all these are done by the monetary policy specialist, the Reserve Bank. And the state does spending, taxing, relief, deficits, budgeting, etc. Here we have the central government giving up some vague number, like, some spurious number, 20 lakh crores and all that. When they are showing tens of thousands of crores every day, stage 1, stage 2, in actual spending by the government. And the rest is all liquidity, backstop, loan guarantee kind of measures which have to go through the banking system and really should have been done by the Reserve Bank. So we are in a situation where neither can we separate the fiscal and the monetary, nor do we believe the stimulus is going to the people who need it most. You see, the big difference is, if I give the money to the people who are starving, who don't have clothes, who cannot get home, they will spend it immediately, and you will get the velocity of money and the multiplier effect happen immediately. And then you will start to see uplift. Number one. Number two, you will prevent the system from breaking down into disequilibrium, into such a pit that it will be harder and harder to pull it out. Instead of that, if we keep talking about the middle of the pyramid, the top of the pyramid, like they did after the 19 budget and the pushback and all that, you are just exacerbating the problem and you are using your ammunition in the wrong place. You're not using, not only are you not using it in the right place, you're using it in the wrong place. Therefore, it reduces your ability to act later. And last of all, I was in a seminar with the giants in our former Junior Minister for Finance.
Right.
And he gave this theory. He said the government is rolling out redemptive measures, kind of support measures, step by step, as the problem gets worse. Now that just makes no sense to me at all. Anybody who has studied any kind of system says that if you let it get out of equilibrium, you cannot control the consequences, and there's no such thing as a smooth reset from here to here. You try to reset it, you'll overshoot, you'll come back, you'll get inflation, you'll get deflation, you'll get bankruptcy. So allowing systems to get out of equilibrium is the real fear. You pump in as much as you can, as soon as you can, to prevent that from happening. Because should the system go into disequilibrium, what has happened in Tamil Nadu? What has happened in Delhi? Your GST revenues and your income tax revenues have fallen through the floor. You're not collecting. Look at what has happened in the US, right? I saw the statistic. In the city of Mumbai, the largest real estate market in the world, registration of 45,000 rupees was collected. It should have been in the hundreds of crores. Mr. Kejriwal announced that Delhi's revenue for the government of Delhi, which should have been 1,300 crores or something, was like 13 crores or something. So the longer you wait to take action, the more your treasury is run out of money, because you still have to pay your fixed costs like salary, pensions, or non-wage O&M, etc. So this notion of I will wait for problems to manifest themselves and then I will spend is just mind-bogglingly scary to me. So, you know, it's neither really fiscal stimulus, nor is it in the right targeted area, and it is not at the right time. It's hard for me to find anything I like about this whole package.
Okay. You know, speaking about the migrants issue, I think that was something which the government didn't take into account at all, because that seems to be one of the biggest crises right now in the country, which there is still no proper planning. You know, it seems to be very ad hoc, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's this whole kind of saying, you know, I spent much of my adult life in America, so a lot of my colloquialisms are from there, this concept of Monday morning quarterbacking. But my point is, if you had announced a lockdown that was going to take effect in a week at a national level, or in Tamil Nadu, if our chief minister had announced a lockdown going to take effect in 2 days or 3 days, you could have arranged special buses, special trains. The government has significant data. They just don't use it for the right purposes. They could have made arrangements to get these people back. Yes, you would have delayed the lockdown's kind of distancing impact in the early days, but you could have sustained it for any length of time after that, once you got people to the right place. The odds of them getting, you know, desperation rations of rice is much better in their hometown than in a place where they have no natural link.
Right.
So this lack of planning on the front part is costing us so dearly, and it is getting compounded exponentially every extension. The first lockdown was bad enough. Now the second lockdown. I was on TV recently and I said I worry about economic revival, because if you go into lifting of lockdown and you don't have the migrant labor that keeps the place running, how are you going to get the economy up? And what I didn't realize is, of course, they are burned by their experience. They're scarred by their experience. You can tell them all you want. Don't worry, sir. We'll take better care of you next time. No, don't worry. The hardest part is over. From now on, you'll get full wages. You'll get full food. Now he says, boss, I've seen you 3 times. You kept telling me only 3 weeks, then only 5 weeks, then only 7 weeks. Just get me home. I just want to be with my family. If I'm going to be poor and starving, at least let me be in a place that I know and with the people I love. So how can we not stop them going? We have to let them go. You know, we have to make facilitation for them to get home. Of course, that's going to have second order, third order labor and market and economy impacts. But we cannot do anything better. We have a moral obligation to get them back. And I just don't see if we're doing enough on that.
Okay. Coming to Tamil Nadu, the DMK has been very vocal about, you know, shutting down the TASMACs. And today the Supreme Court vacated the order which the Madras High Court had passed on the shutting down. But if, you know, the TASMACs were closed, then what happens to the coffers of the government? Because they bring nearly 30,000 crores of revenue per year. Then, you know, what is the government going to do for revenue and to spend money?
Yeah, let me address that, if you don't mind, in 2 or 3 different levels. The first level, I am one of the greatest kind of proponents of separation of powers between the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. It is my understanding, relative to my experience around the world, that the powers of the 3 have become commingled in ways that are bad for democracy. So in general, I'm one of the guys that says that the judiciary should stay out of fiscal matters and operational matters and policy matters, and elected people should do that. In this particular case, however, we have two different issues. The issue is not about the morality or the financial value of the TASMAC system, not about morality of alcohol sale. It is about the timing of it. It says when you have locked down people, when you have not opened the tea shops, when you have not allowed bus transport, when you don't allow more than 30% staff in the office, when you control people's movement with passes, do you then want to open up the liquor stores? Because you get at least 2, if not 3, immediate negative consequences. We saw the level of crowding. The lines were kilometers long. So you have just thrown social distancing to a mix, to a complete toss. Number 2, that level of people who have not had employment for 2 months, 3 months, or 6 weeks at least, how are they going to get the money to buy these things, right? So it's going to come out of digging a further hole into the family's finances. Number 3, what happens after they drink? Already we have seen domestic violence and other cases rise during this period. If they drink, they're going to lose their, some of them at least are going to lose their kind of rationality or temporarily and behave in ways they wouldn't have if they were not under the influence of alcohol. So these were the practical reasons for which we said no. Now, of course, you make the point. Of course, the government is not heartless. It just says it needs the money that badly. You say, take care of people's health and mind and spread of infection first. They say, listen, I have to pay the bills. I have to pay the wages, so I have to do something. That gets into the much greater, longer term issue of, do you really kind of see this as the positive that you think it is? Because the paper says so. It says 30,000 crores TASMAC revenue plus dividend plus liquor tax. I'm not so sure. Actually, I've been a member of the Public Accounts Committee for 4 years now, and I've seen the Tamil Nadu accounts in very clear kind of detail. Of course, we see the revenue clearly. It comes in one line item. But the costs of these are myriad and they are hidden. It increases absenteeism. It increases domestic violence. It increases health problems. These are all people who are poor enough that they'll show up at the GH for treatment. They're not going to private hospitals and spending their own money. So it increases a lot of social ills that we cannot calculate the cost of. So I'm not so sure what the net of this is, because we are a 20 lakh crore economy, Tamil Nadu. Right? This year's GSDP estimate is a 20 lakh crore. 20 lakh crore economy, were you to assume that 1% of GSDP production or 2% of GSDP production is not achieved or actualized because of alcoholism and its related problems, you're looking at 20,000 to 40,000 crores. So this trade-off has never been that clear to me. In the longer term, I am very clear that were the government of Tamil Nadu to manage its finances properly and better, what I would say I have seen at the global level, we do not need to be dependent on this revenue. I'm not saying, therefore, that we should shut it down. I'm not casting any morality aspersions on this. I am saying that you do not have to depend on this dubious income which comes in clean but costs you all these hidden things. I personally believe that this balance sheet and this cash flow can be managed much more kind of sophisticated and thoughtful ways than this kind of dependence on TASMAC. Of course, you can't change it overnight. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in the longer term, it's not clear to me this is a kind of, required transfusion. I think it can be done without this.
Okay. So given that, the economic crisis is not just across India, even Tamil Nadu is it's facing a big economic crisis. And the Chief Minister has set up a committee to look into it and see how best, it can be revived and in what ways they can help the people. But what steps do you think need to be taken? Because it's not as simple as it looks, isn't it, at this point in time?
Yeah, again, let me step back if you don't mind. I have been the guy kicking off the annual budget debate on behalf of my party because my leader has been gracious in giving me the opportunity now for about 4 years. In 2017, when Mr. Jayakumar was then finance minister temporarily, I made a presentation, kicked off the debate, and I said, what I have observed is that the state's revenues as a function of its GSDP, so I'm saying adjusted for whether the cycle is good or bad, have dropped from about 10.5% of GSDP to about 7.5%. So you have lost about a third of your revenue. If you do not fix this, then you're going to have a problem because you're going to have ever increasing revenue deficits. No politician can ever cut back spending that fast. The fixed costs are growing. like salary, pensions and all that, contractually through finance commissions, pay commissions and all that. So it's not a complicated concept, but it's hard to do in execution. So at that time I told him, of course it's politically difficult to raise revenues. How will you raise revenues? You have to raise taxes, you have to raise fees, you have to bring it in line with cost of living, you have to bring it in line with the value of money today. So what I said to him in 2017, I said, you constitute a committee that includes opposition members, union leaders, industrialists, NGOs, economists, professors, government employees, IAS officers and ministers. Then if you come up with a collective outcome, this cannot be kind of striked and made a kind of street problem. They didn't listen to me then. I said it again multiple times. This year I said it again. On February 17th, I inaugurated the debate. On February 21st, Honorable Finance Minister, Mr. Palanivel, in his speech was gracious enough to expect. He said, Honorable Member Thiaga Rajan said, why don't you do this? We have taken his advice. Anyway, we had been thinking of doing it, but since Thiaga Rajan brought it up, we agreed we're going to set up a committee with the goal of bringing back the state's revenues. Now, let's be very clear. 3.5% of the GSDP is 70,000 crores. I'm not talking about, 5 paisa, 10 paisa. 70,000 crores. 2.5 times what you're looking at in TASMAC revenues. This has been lost through, in my opinion, fiscal mismanagement and corruption on the way in mining, in sand, in granite, in licenses, in chemicals, and everything. Revenues on the way in, forget corruption on the way out. This did not happen under Ms. Jayalalitha. This did not happen under Palanivel Thiaga. So I have my own theory, which I'm hoping to write a book this year, which is that the lack of political leadership is what leads to this kind of decay. Somebody, of course, we have one extreme, Mr. Modi, who thinks his mandate is effectively come from God and he can do whatever he wants, though he doesn't have the talent for it or the skill for it. And then we have the other extreme people like Mr. EPS and OPS, who know that the people didn't put them in that seat. Circumstance and Kuvatur and backdoor and the jail, so they don't have the courage to take decisions that will structurally do the right thing. So what has happened, because we were already in a very dire state. Now the Chief Secretary's letter says, the committee that was announced by Mr. O. Pannirselvam on the 21st of February, though Chief Secretary doesn't have the courtesy to give me credit for the idea, though Finance Minister said it, he says that committee will be repurposed. It will be repurposed away from just focusing on the additional 3.5%, the revenue to GSDP, that he says stated. We will repurpose it instead of just tax to GSDP or revenue to GSDP. We will make it a broader committee, broader mandate to look at economic revival of Tamil Nadu. Now I have a few problems. This committee composition doesn't give me great confidence. It has 24 members, 10 of whom are IAS officers, 3 or 4 are government appointed VCs, 4 or 5 are, confounded thought. All of them are board members of the Madras School of Economics operating on government land and a board appointed with government interference. So more than 2/3 of these members are some way government affected people. Why do you need an outside committee for that? You call a working group of people and get them together. The few people who have come from outside, to me, are not of the level, just to give a comparison. The government of Rajasthan set up a committee. In that it has Raghuram Rajan, it has, many Nobel Prize winners, it has trade unions, it has industrialists, it has NGOs, it has world organizations, and they already generated a report and published it on April 13th. Now, where is that? This committee, the government of Tamil Nadu says, I'm going to give you 3 months. Sir, in 3 months, your balance sheet and your financial statements are going to be rotten. You're not getting any revenue. Nobody's putting diesel, nobody's putting petrol, nobody's buying alcohol. Your revenues have gone through the floor. Whatever your projections were, even in a normal year, I've accused this government of overestimating revenues and underestimating costs, and therefore the fiscal deficit ends up, forget the fiscal, the revenue deficit ends up 2x, 3x, 5x what they project during the budget. This year, the budget should be torn up and thrown in the dustbin because there's zero chance of achieving it. Then why are you giving them 3 months to come back to you with the report? You have industrialists, you don't have trade unions. Surely you must get a balanced committee. You must get global level sophisticated people who have done this before. You must give them 15 days or 20 days to come back. If you give them 3 months, what do? So, forgive me for being a bit pessimistic, but I don't see this committee as having, yes, it has big industrialist names and all that, but I don't see this committee as having impact if it takes you 3 months to get the report back. They could have done a lot better constitution of the committee.
Okay. So, going forward from that, where do you, think Tamil Nadu is going to be over the next 6 months? What do you think are the steps that need to be urgently taken? Because the COVID is here to stay. It's not going to, disappear overnight. And the next 2 years at least, I don't know when we're going to find the vaccine and so on and so forth. But in the next 6 months, at least for the rest of the year, in terms of employment for the people here, and especially now that the migrant labor has moved out, how are people going to manage? What is going to be the income pattern for them? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, listen, if I was that smart that I could do everything, I'm not sure I would be sitting with you here. But the first step to this is what Mr. D.K. Shivakumar has said in Karnataka. I've been saying softly for a month, is that the government should reconvene the assembly. I mean, of course, with social distancing, safety and all that stuff. But whatever budget and demands we passed last time are unrealistic, unachievable, irrelevant. So the whole point of democracy, having legislators and having different views, is that different people have different ideas. Nobody has got a monopoly on good ideas. And, I'll just give you the example of why, in my opinion, Thalaivar Kalaignar was a far superior kind of administrator of the state. I would say that Ms. Jayalalitha was a far better administrator of a party. She was a disciplinarian that could make them jump in ways that normal people will not do with self-respect. But why Thalaivar Kalaignar was a brilliant administrator of the state was, as smart as he was, on every major issue, he would take inputs from dozens of people. You wouldn't even know who all you're speaking to. Of course, you'll speak to Chief Secretary, of course, you'll speak to IAS officers, you'll speak to party members. He'll call some Vatasela, some 6-level down officer somewhere and say, hey, I know, all these things he would take input. And his greatest capacity was when he took input, he has a capacity that I don't have and most people don't have. If I hear things that I like and are consistent with my thinking, you will see it in my eyes or my face. With him, you could never tell. If he was with your, he was in line with your thinking, he thought he was happy to hear what you were saying, or unhappy, he would never criticize, he would never oppose, he would just listen. Somebody like that can get a lot more done because they have the luxury of getting 10, 20, 30 diverse views. No human being is not close enough to God. So the more views you get, of course, there's a law of diminishing returns. After the first 20, maybe the 30th one is not giving you that much value. But the more input you take, the better off your policies, your decisions, your final outcomes and bills are. That's why democracy says have a parliament and legislature. D.K. Shivakumar said this, and Mr. Yediyurappa has followed it. Yediyurappa has been calling for all-party meetings, called the opposition. Mr. Shivakumar said, let's throw out the budget and start over again. Mr. Yediyurappa said, yeah, you're right, we have to do it. What happened in Tamil Nadu? Not only are we, delayed reacting because we're passing some now worthless piece of paper, budget and demand, but where is the Chief Minister on this? We have to rethink everything. In some ways, the ship that was otherwise listing slowly has crashed. Has just sunk dramatically. So all the old calculations have to be out. We have to start from scratch. If you're going to start from scratch, you want 20, 30 good ideas from different people who will argue vociferously, all in the right cause. Right? The whole point is we sink or swim together. There's no upside for me where the rest of the state goes down. Elections will come when elections will come. But if we're all suffering and in hospital and without food, who cares about the elections? Right? Am I going to be thrilled because elections bring regime change and I'm going to take over a really crappy situation? We are much more interested in protecting ourselves, our families, our voters, our constituents. And that requires a lot more input than these people are getting. It's very clear. I don't want to, allude to myself as some specialist, but I think the fundamental notion of where we should focus has to change. We are a rich state, structurally rich state. We have lots and lots of assets. If we do the right kind of marketing and the right kind of structuring and build the right kind of confidence, the government of India has given states the right to issue, though the government of India is slowly stripping away our financial freedom, we still have legally the right to issue our own debt in the international markets. So there are lots of things we could do with the right advice. We have lots of flexibility. We are a state with high education, high per capita GDP, lots of assets. These can be easily kind of leveraged to get access to almost equivalent of a year's worth of revenue we can create out of these. But it requires the input and thought of a lot of people.
Right. Speaking, you touched upon the elections, and of course, 2021, the elections are supposed to be held. When Edappadi Palaniswamy became the chief minister after Dr. Jayalalitha's demise, the DMK was very sure that the government would fall, but they've somehow managed to complete their tenure nearly. Don't you think, and also I think there is a perception among the people where they seem to think that EPS has done a good job as CM, perception, allegedly. So don't you think this is going to be a tough battle for the DMK also, because now with the coronavirus crisis and him handling the situation, if he's able to do a good job of it, then obviously that is going to work in their favor as well, isn't it?
Let me say a few things. I'm an ex-trader, I'm a risk manager, I rarely go out on a limb. But I'll go out on a limb here and say that whenever the state elections are held, it will be a blowout. Just like the last MP elections were a blowout, it will be a blowout. Tape it, hold me to it, let's see what happens. And I'm saying whichever government had been in power, it would have been hard to justify that your performance had been adequate. Just because what you see on social media or talk to some middle class or upper middle class people doesn't reflect reality. We know what's happening on the ground. The reason I built up an IT wing infrastructure down to every booth, every ward, every village is that I can have a pulse on the people. The people are mad. The people were mad in 2019 May. That's why we saw the biggest sweep since 1996. We saw a 22.3% margin victory for us, and it was evident in the polling that I did before and after. Of course, we lost some by-elections, but people are very rational, very self-interested, very thoughtful voters in Tamil Nadu. And I do polling after the election. I do as much polling after the election as I did before. Why did you vote the way you did? How did this change, etc.? And I have supreme confidence that I don't care about the next election. Whenever it happens, we will win. Now I go back to a couple of different issues. If you tell me they are performing well, I say I deeply protest that. In finances, they made a mess of it. In policy, they made a mess of it. In corruption, of course, I'm not saying corruption is one side wrong, but I'm saying the levels of corruption are grotesque. And because they didn't have the political willpower, they've not been able to control the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats have started running amok. So, of course, we'll bring this out closer and closer to time. But we have sitting ministers who are all under indictment by DVSC, Mr. Velumani, Mr. Edappadi, Mr. OPS, all have open cases, High Court approved CBCID or CBI or DVSC cases. So, my point is that performance has not been good. If you say it's been good, I take exception with you. I ask you to tell me policies and give me data and I'll respond. I go one step deeper than that. You say they have lasted 5 years. I completely agree with you. I did not think they would last 1 year or 2 years. But what I did not think and what my leader did not think was how anti-democratic Mr. Modi would get in order to keep his, as they call him, daddy, this must be his children. How much the father would bend the rule of law and bend the rules of democracy to keep his children in power, including governors doing handshake deals and courts not hearing cases and courts putting off cases for 3 years and 5 years. And if I start talking about this, it will make me cry. It is a mockery of democracy, of justice. You look at Mr. Appavu's case, where it's clear that the High Court has said the election of Inbadurai was wrong. They have taken it to Supreme Court, put it on ice. You take the 11 MLAs case, they took it to Supreme Court, put it on ice for 3 years. The 11 MLAs who sat in the assembly, voted against the confidence motion, were not taken action on. The 18 MLAs who said outside the assembly that they wanted a change of chief minister without defecting parties were suspended and thrown out, expelled. The court upheld it. First one judge, then 2 judgments, then 3 judgments. This is a mockery and a sham of the judicial system. It is a shame on a country that democracy has been hijacked and run into the ground like this. Of course, it's hard for me to say, if I really get upset about it, I say, why am I still in the system? I should retire and go back to being a banker and get on with my life. So we fight the good fight. But they have continued because the laws and the judicial system and the democratic norms of the constitution have been continuously violated in every step, in every way, by the Speaker, by the High Court, by the Supreme Court, which has not had a shred of conscience to look at the will of the people. I'll give you a personal example. In August of 2016, I was included in a list of MLAs that were thrown out of the assembly allegedly for bad behavior and refusing to follow an eviction order. I went to court because I was first time MLA. I said, this kind of injustice will not stand. Why did I go to court? I was not even in the chamber when all this stuff happened. I had exited the chamber 1.5 hours before when none of this had happened. And I was in the library of the assembly, which coincidentally, both areas have CCTV. So there is a closed circuit TV recording that I'm in the library. There are closed circuit TVs in the assembly showing that I'm not in the assembly. The speaker includes my list of me in the list of names to be thrown out. Why? Because Ms. Jayalalitha had given instruction, when I go and present the police demand tomorrow, the opposition benches should be empty. So throw out all the DMK. So I go to court. I say, how can I be thrown out? He says, first I disrupted the proceedings. Then he warned me. Then I refused to answer, to come under control. Then he ordered me evicted. Then I refused to get out. Then he got the marshal to come and drag me. Then when the marshal was dragging me, I still continued to shout. And then, therefore, the House leader, Mr. OPS, passed a resolution that we should all be suspended for 5 days. This was a blanket charge against everybody. I was not even in the building. How can this apply to me? So I went to the court. I went to ask then Palanivel Thiaga. I said, I'll court if he can do this, tomorrow you will say, all of you who have mustaches, get out of the house. All of you who have red and black dhotis, get out. What the hell? You have to do something wrong. You have to violate some rule to be thrown out. I went to the High Court. It moved speedily for 3-4 steps, maybe in 1 month or 6 weeks. We got to the point where I said, ask them to produce the tapes. Immediately, then Assembly Secretary, worst of all Assembly Secretaries, my father was Speaker and my grandfather was Chief Minister. I know the history of Assembly Secretaries, worst of worst human beings. This fellow gives the affidavit to the court saying, oh, because we only keep the library CCTVs for 1 month, and because I had no way of knowing that Thiaga Rajan would ask for this, that tape has been erased. So the tape that would show I was in the library conveniently went missing. Never mind. The tape in the assembly shows I'm not there. So after much pressure, they gave that tape. The minute the tape got delivered, what happened? The case went into cold storage. Because now they know that if they hear it, they have to give me a verdict that says suspension was illegal and I go back. This is now November of 2016. From November of 2016, for almost 3.5 years, the case has not been listed for hearing once. 3 Chief Justices have come and gone. And the case has not been listed for hearing once. How is this democracy? Right? So if you say they've lasted for 3-4 years, if I'm in the mafia and the Godfather makes the law work for me, that is not some talent of my capacity, it's the Godfather's capacity.
Okay. But as I said, things have changed because of the coronavirus pandemic. If the elections are announced, I don't know, maybe towards the end of next year, one doesn't know at this point. But given this pandemic, typically the Tharumune Kootams, which have been existing since the time of Anna, the political rallies, all those, it's going to be difficult to hold those, right? And these are very integral to our campaigning system. What do you think
yes or no? Yes or no? I tell you 2-3 things. First of all, I'm a bit alarmed when you say end of next year because constitutionally this government's term finishes in May of 2000, so less than a year from now. Which means either they have to hold the elections or go president's rule or something. But anyway, apart, I say the nature of campaigning had already changed. You're right that this COVID accelerates some things. But I'll tell you both sides, or maybe three aspects of this. The first aspect is already the extent of communications technology penetration, particularly in Tamil Nadu, 70% plus have smartphones. Average voter age has dropped to something like 35. Right? So we are not, and most of the people here don't remember the Dravidian struggle and the right for drinking from the same water pot and reservations and all that. All that is taken for granted. So at some level, the nature of politics had already shifted structurally, right? There was no Talaivar, there was no Ms. Jayalalitha, there is no kind of, other than our leader, there's no kind of towering state leader, in my opinion. If you think that EPS has achieved some recognition in 2 years, maybe, maybe not. But my point is the nature of politics has already shifted heavily. That's why my leader had the foresight to say, Thiagu, create the IT wing and get to building a kind of digital platform and infrastructure and data and communications and all that stuff. That's one extreme. The other extreme, I'll say, even in my own constituency, if I am not in touch with the people, I could be a superstar on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I cannot get re-elected. More
Right.
than anything, people are educated and smart in this state. They know who has akare, who cares, who has compassion, who has theramai, who can work, who has the capacity to deliver. And so, as much as we rely on social media and communications and all that, I don't think you can win on that. Let me put it a different way. The BJP spends about 100 times or maybe 500 times on WhatsApp and social media and IT that, let's say, the DMK spends. How did they only get 3% of the vote at the last 2019 election in Tamil Nadu? Across the country, they did fine. Surely they're sending millions of WhatsApp messages saying Modi is God and everybody else is crook and all this stuff. Why did it not take? So in Tamil Nadu, at least, you still need to have a connect with the people. The
Right.
third aspect of it is, I'll say that you can't believe how quickly things can change. I am a guy who was at the base of the World Trade Center when the plane hit. I was at Lehman Brothers running two companies with few hundred employees when we went bankrupt, thinking that when I went to bed, I thought we'd be bought by Barclays. When I woke up in the morning, we were gone. So things, when they finally change, they change. When I was in the markets, we thought that 2003 was a peak of the markets. It continued till 2008 and then crashed in a way that we have not seen for generations till now. Of course, this crash is worse than that. So change comes later than you think, but when it comes dramatically and rapidly. In my party, within 2 weeks of the lockdown happening, we have gone full digital. My
Okay.
leader talks to all the way down to Ondriya level, Mavatam, Ondriyam, even down to Nagaram level by Zoom calls on a regular basis every day. Within 24 hours, when he said, Thiago, let's get it done, we got all the top 250 people lined up on Zoom. Average age maybe 60 or 65.
Right.
Right? So we've gone full digital, all, not just my wing anyway with IT wing. We do all
Right.
our regular conferences on, Zoom or Google Hangouts or Microsoft Meeting or whatever. But the entire party's infrastructure has gone digital. For example, tomorrow my leader is holding a district secretary's meeting. It was
Okay.
announced this afternoon and will happen tomorrow morning at 10:30 online. Everybody's still in their own house. So at least in Tamil Nadu, internet speeds are really fast. The
Right.
geo market disruption, where it made data effectively cost zero, has made everybody have access. And we have kind of penetration up to 70-75%. When my leader, for example, had a call with the beneficiaries of Undrinai Momba, again, 18 hours notice, I was able to get my IT wing office bearers for every region out to 129 beneficiaries across the state of Tamil Nadu, including the 1 rupee idli lady in Coimbatore
In
district,
Coimbatore.
on
Yeah.
18 hours notice and bring them all online. So either they had phones which we set up for them and brought them online, or my office bearer put his phone in front of the party's face and the party spoke. So
Right.
systems change much faster than you think. And we are in that kind of flux now. So of
Right.
course the world is going to look a lot different. In my view, as a sitting representative, I think you will never get over the human connecting politics. At the end of the day, if I have not done, between me and my office bearers, we have supplied food to almost 30,000 families out of the 71,000 and change in my constituency. If we had not done that, the best of social media and hype and all that is not going to get me re-elected. If I had done that, whether I have social media or not, more likely I'll get elected, because all politics is local. At the state level,
Right.
all the stuff matters. In my constituency, what I do on the ground matters. If I don't do that, I can't get re-elected.
But how will political campaigns, rallies still happen? Do you think that is going to be possible?
No, I don't think. And rallies, in my opinion, rallies were, this is a bit controversial, I'll say, but rallies
Okay.
were more a show of strength and kind of perception building, right? Do you believe that everybody who came to a rally voted for us? I don't believe so, right? I'm not saying either in ADMK or DMK or any
Right.
party. Rallies and all that was just a hangover of the old era. And in some ways, this kind of a crisis helps us move out of this kind of, what do you say, image building to real work, right?
Okay.
Or kind of facades to actual content.
But Tamil Nadu politics has always had this freebie culture, which has always been criticized by many, and which the masses also have come to expect, in many ways. But now with the whole economic issues and, revenues falling and incomes, the question of where is the money going to come from, This is going to be affected, isn't it? Do you think this is going to play a key role in the upcoming elections?
I'm a bit worried that we're going to run out of time, because my view
sure.
is my view is, let me be very clear. I have spoken extensively about the notion of freebies, right? Just because everything is called freebie is not the same. I have clearly delineated, both in the assembly and in multiple podcasts and conferences. For example, free noon meal is a freebie. Free laptop is a freebie. Free cycle is a freebie. MNREGA wages, some places they are called freebies. Free fan is a freebie. Free TV is a freebie. So if you take freebies, I've already categorized them into what we consider revenue spending and kind of current account spending in accounting terms, but are really investments in the future. For example, laptops to kids, or to school kids, or noon meal food
scheme
is an investment in the future of my state, my people, right? So whoever calls it whatever, everybody else in the world is now following that model. Then there are freebies that I think are kind of risk management and risk mitigation freebies, like giving gold for weddings and giving women special packages at pregnancy and health insurance and stuff like that. I think those are just social spending. You call it what you want. It's what welfare states do, from Scandinavia to California to Australia. So we just do it, and you say because we initiated it, you call it Dravidian and freebie. Then there are, of course, things that can be done well or badly, right? In the normal circumstances, forget the crisis. If you do MNREGA and actually get work out of it, it is fantastic, because you are getting the resource to the right hands and ensuring nobody's hungry. But if you give MNREGA pay without any output in a normal time, not now, then you are creating inflation, because what you're doing is you're giving extra money without any extra production, and you do this on a scale of lakhs of people. You do double inflation. Inflation, because your technical sense of inflation is more money chasing same goods or less goods. But you also do wage inflation, because if you pay people 150 or 200 rupees to do nothing, then surely the people who do something want 300 or 400 or 500. So agricultural input costs go up, and therefore you get inflation. So I have expounded on this in very much detail, multiple places. I don't, we could speak for half an hour on this. So there are good so-called freebies. There are lousy so-called freebies. In my opinion, the worst freebie is this 25,000 rupee subsidy for buying scooters for working women, for 1 lakh women a year. Right? We want to encourage the public transportation system. We don't want to encourage congestion. We don't want to increase fossil fuel burn. We don't want to allow excess corruption. When your pension for a widow is 1,000 a month, do you really want to give 25,000 to one beneficiary and increase the amount of corruption that goes into that allocation? So, this is a thesis for another day. But broadly speaking, neither has Tamil Nadu nor any other state that has really done what we call freebie culture really done enough of it to change the nature of the budget. Right? I'll send you my speech if you want to post it. In this budget session, I said, really, you have messed up the finances to the point where you're not even borrowing just for giving freebies. It's one thing to say a good state borrows only for capital investment, runs current account on current revenue, and only borrows for capital. That's what the FRBM Act in Delhi and the FRA Act in Tamil Nadu say. A mediocre state does most of that, but also because they don't manage their revenue well, end up borrowing a little bit to do discretionary spending. An incompetent state like Tamil Nadu in the last 5 years, since 14, borrows not just to do revenue spending of discretionary, but borrows to pay compulsory spending like salaries and interest. Now you have really screwed up your system, because you're borrowing to stay alive. So in this situation, if you look, there are structural problems that are 10x or 20x what we're spending on these freebies. The freebies may be 10,000, 20,000 crores. But we have borrowed 1,30,000, 1,40,000 crores in the last few years, much of it to pay interest and kind of keep the ship alive. So we are much worse off. I don't see any way. Of course, there are lousy freebies. Of course, there's corruption in the freebies. But there are also great freebies. Great, noon meal scheme is fantastic. Giving cycles to high school students is fantastic. Giving laptops to college going students is fantastic. These are great investments that give me great results. Why would I stop that?
Right.
So this is a nuanced question. I don't see the crisis really changing. Of course, there are extreme noise examples, right? This government in ADMK twice gave 1,000 rupee bonuses ahead of elections. 1,000 rupee, come to the ration shop and give it.
Right.
I showed it mathematically in this meeting, in this budget meeting, I said, all those who have borrowed money, because you had already been borrowing to pay salaries, when you suddenly announce an X budget item, you didn't put it in the budget to give this 1,000 rupees. If you suddenly announce, I'm going to give 1,000 for Pongal, 1,000 for Diwali, what does that mean? You are putting debt on the heads of the sons and daughters and giving it in the pockets of the fathers and mothers. Is that a great talent? You are taking that money and giving it to them because you think you're bribing them to feel good. They are not stupid. Average person in Tamil Nadu understands that is their money or their children's money being recycled back to them after commission corruption. So, of course, there's a lot of bad things that happen, but this crisis doesn't change anything, in my view, fundamentally about the nature of welfare spending or the relative value of different priorities or the good versus bad. All that was already clear and was not big enough to say, now that I'm in crisis, I won't give rations. Can you do that? You cannot do that.
Right. Okay, and my last question to you would be about, the kind of backlash you faced, the party faced, the DMK faced when political strategist Prashant Kishor was hired. But how much of value do you really think he's going to add, given that, he's helping? I mean, this is regional politics. He doesn't speak Tamil. The political landscape here is very different. How much of value do you think he's really going to add?
I can't be criticized both ways. I can't be criticized in the sense that I bring a guy that you say is irrelevant, and then you can't say, oh, why do you need a guy who's irrelevant? I'm not stupid, right? So my own view, and this is a very deeply personal view for multiple reasons. Please indulge me. I spent the better part of my career in the US as a consultant. I did as an Indian, Hindu, Tamil, Mudaliyar boy sitting in New York. I did consulting in 30 or 40 states and multiple countries for big multinational IBM, Sumitomo's, Motorola's of the world, going to their factories all over. They didn't ask me, why are you coming here to white man's country, you Indian boy? If you have the talent and you have the skill and you have the knowledge, then that's why the American market is so efficient. They say different people bring different skills to the table. And you do it. And I was doing this at the age of 23, 24. I was going and telling 50-year-old plant managers how they should improve the functioning of their factory, because I knew that aspect better than that. We were entering the era of the first kind of stages of the second industrial revolution, the PC penetration of the processes of supply chain and manufacturing. So the same way, when I went to Wall Street at the ripe old age of 35, and they asked me, hey, 27-year-old trading assistant is going to be the guy who's teaching you at 35. You have 4 degrees, the guy has 1. Are you going to have an ego problem? I said, listen, as long as he knows better than me, I'll take it. Because when I was 25, I was telling 50-year-old white man what to do. Surely this 27-year-old boy telling me is no problem. As long as he knows more than me, I'll learn from him. So this is the basis for all relationships as consultants. If I get a consultant, surely I want a consultant who brings a different perspective, a different set of skills, a different infrastructure than me. That is, when I was a consultant, when I was a banker at Standard Chartered, for example, I used to hire McKinsey all the time. Is it because McKinsey knows banking better than Standard Chartered? No. It's because all of us already know our way of life. They know because they've served 10 banks and 20 clients over the years and they've built up knowledge. So the whole point of getting a consultant is not that you change your business model, it's not that you change your values. At least in politics, we are Dravidians, we are the most steadfast holders. My leader has been the one who's unwavering. No matter what deal the BJP offers, he says, no, we will not deviate from our principles. So we are surely not doing that if we get a consultant. When I have a paid consultant, when the party signs a contract with payments in white money, the stupid numbers they throw out, all bullshit, 300 crores and all that. Whatever is paid is done, documented, taxable, visible to the tax authorities, to the election commission, everybody, done by check. Because they have hundreds of employees who are also getting EPF, TDS, etc. When you do that, you really want somebody who brings a different perspective than you. Why should I get a guy who looks like me? Then I already know what I'm doing. I want a guy who has different experience than me. And whether we like it or not, we have been elevated to national level kind of opposition. Because we have such a high number of MPs, because we are the last redoubt against the kind of Hindutva wave. We have, the BJP is still struggling to cross the 2%, 3% mark here. And therefore, the target of a lot of attention is the DMK. And we want skilled people who have played that kind of game in other states and other places most of the time. Of course, nobody is infallible. Not everybody wins 100% of the time. But somebody like a PK, I have known personally since 2016. I'm an ex-consultant, he's an ex-consultant. We have a lot in common. Of course, he and his team bring a different perspective than what we have. If they were the same, why would I get them? But just because I get a consultant doesn't mean anything. The government of India uses consultants. The government of Tamil Nadu uses consultants. The World Bank uses consultants. The IMF uses consultants. Everybody uses consultants. Why is getting a consultant a bad thing? It's only a bad thing because everybody's envious that we got the consultant that everybody else wanted. This same Prashant Kishor has done work for Makkalini Meyer, did some long discussions with Mr. Rajnikanth and nothing came of it. Even did a project for the ADMK, in my opinion, though he's too professional to tell me about it, and I'm too professional to ask about what he did for other clients. So, if you look at, now the ADMK has got a team called DIMOS, which is again a consultant, right? So why doesn't anybody get worked up about it? Is it that you all agree that the ADMK is kind of second-tier leadership, therefore they need consultants, but the DMK is first-tier leadership, therefore we don't need consultants? No, I don't think it's like that. I think, as I've said before, the nature of elections is changing, the nature of technology is changing, the nature of kind of campaigning is changing, and as much help as we get. And one thing I will say about PK, though there's this vimarsanam, there's this criticism that he has played all sides of the battle. He was with Mr. Modi, he was with Mr. Nitish Kumar, etc. Normally, a consultant doesn't have a fundamental kolgai, doesn't have a fundamental principle bias. They say, whoever pays and I'll advise. But increasingly, if you see,
we'll have to wrap up in 2 minutes.
Just 1 second. Increasingly, if you see PK, he takes a position. He says, I'll only work for those people who are pro-democracy, pro-secularism, less authoritarianism. So I respect him additionally for that.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I had to interrupt because it gets cut off. The lives get cut off at 1 hour. They just automatically shut down. I'm really sorry about that. But thank you so much, Dr. Thiaga Rajan, for this conversation. I think it was very engaging, very interesting. And of course, I'm putting up the video on YouTube and writing out the story as well for the Sunday Guardian for more people to, read. It was a wonderful insight. And I think there were a lot of key things that you said today as far as, what needs to be done in the state and also the changing nature of politics and campaigning and what's going to happen in the future. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I hope, it was an interesting session for you too.
Thank you very much for having me. Always happy to get interesting questions. Makes you think. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.